The dictionary definition of the phenomenon known as mass hysteria is a condition affecting a group of persons characterized by excitement or anxiety, irrational behavior or beliefs, or inexplicable symptoms of illness. The instances of mass hysteria have been recorded throughout human history and, well, across the whole world. While it can't be predicted when it might happen, there do seem to be similar underlying factors between cases which can explain why an epidemic might start, if not exactly how. The common link seems to be a group of people under stressful conditions that manifest their psychological stress into physical symptoms. These symptoms are then passed throughout the group they are in, with everyone falling prey to the strange behavior or beliefs. There are some really famous examples, such as the Salem witch trials and the satanic panic of the 1980s and 90s, that have taken mass hysteria and irrational beliefs to, well, deadly lengths. So let's look at some of the weirdest cases of mass hysteria that have been recorded so far. One person deciding to behave a bit oddly is not usually a cause for concern. If you see someone dancing around by themselves in the middle of a city street, you generally give them a wide berth and then get on with your day. But what if other people started joining in, and not in a sort of fun flash mob kind of way, but in an uncontrolled and fervent way that went on for days and led to some people dying? Be the worst flash mob ever, not that there is anything good about flash mobs. That's what happened in Strasbourg in 1518. You might have heard of St. Vitus dance, a disorder where people start uncontrollably jerking and moving. This was named after St. Vitus, obviously, who is the patron saint of dancers and entertainers. There isn't anything entertaining about this dance, though, with some sufferers eventually dying of exhaustion or heart attacks. In one of the earliest documented examples of mass hysteria, a woman started dancing in the street in July 1518. After a while, other people joined her, and the dancing group grew as the outbreak spread. Incredibly, it wasn't until September that the dancing plague was brought under control, with doctors rounding up people to take them off to hospital and the magistrate of Strasbourg clamping down on this sort of behavior. At the time, a theory of demonic possession was offered as a reason for the dancing, and as most of the afflicted were young women, another suggestion was given as overheated blood, a condition that apparently only affected women. The past was the worst. There are no confirmed numbers relating to how large the afflicted group was, with estimates ranging from between 50 and a whopping 400. But even 50 people unable to stop dancing is, well, 50 too many. Another theory proffered to explain the behavior is that of the victims having ingested a fungus on moldy bread, which acts in a similar way to LSD. It does not explain why everyone behaved so similarly, though, as psychotropic chemicals do not affect large numbers of people in the same way. Mass hysteria just seems more likely, with the underlying factor being the stress caused by the poor conditions many people were living in at the time. There were many recorded outbreaks of this dancing disease, especially in the Middle Ages, with the issue generally resolving itself after weeks or sometimes months. It does still sometimes occur nowadays, and medication can be given to help control the involuntary movements, but no cure has been found. You wouldn't expect too many weird things to go on in a nunnery, right? They're calm groups of religious women living under God and serving their communities. Well, in the Middle Ages, two very bizarre cases of mass hysteria took hold in the convents of Europe. The first example happens in France, where one young nun started to make meowing noises, as one apparently does. This escalated into every nun in the convent meowing at the same time for hours a day. It might not have been so bad if they'd chosen a different animal to imitate, but cats were linked with Satan at the time, so not only were the women making annoying noises, they were also baiting God by sounding like the devil's pet. Eventually, this all stopped when, after complaints from the neighbors, a group of soldiers arrived and threatened to beat the nuns if they didn't put a sock in it. That'd be a weird assignment for a soldier. Go and beat the meowing nuns until they stop, alright? Yes, Corporal. Later in the 15th century, a nun in a German convent began to bite her sisters instead of being put in a nun timeout or thrown in an insane asylum. The biting behavior actually spread, with all the nuns in the convent taking a chomp at each other on a regular basis. As if that wasn't weird enough, when news of this particular social contagion spread, it started happening at other nunneries across Germany, into Holland, as well as far away as Italy. With no clues as to what to do, religious authorities tried praying and eventually turned to exorcisms to cast the biting demons out, but obviously this did nothing to prevent the epidemic from continuing. Finally, it came down to physical threats and punishments of whipping or being held underwater that got the behavior to stop. Sometimes you just gotta rein those nuns in. You might wonder why nuns were seemingly so susceptible to falling victim to mass hysteria, but especially at this time in history, lots of the convents were made up of young women put there against their will who were forced into a life of celibacy and hard work by their families. Brilliant. If this doesn't create a breeding ground for psychological stress, then we really don't know what does. Also, the Middle Ages were a very religious and superstitious time, which would have fed into the bizarre group events with talk of devils and sorcery, just adding lots of fuel to the fire. Beer can make people do strange things. In Halifax, England, in November 1938, the whole town was in a panic after a number of attacks by a mysterious man who was slashing people with a razor. Encouraged by scaremongering newspaper articles, mass hysteria gripped the town, with businesses shutting down until the attacker was found. More reports came in from neighbouring towns of slasher attacks, and detectives from Scotland Yard were eventually called to investigate. Convinced that they were doing the right thing, groups of townspeople started roaming the streets to find the slasher, themselves becoming violent attackers if they came upon a person who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. After just over 2 weeks of the town becoming a hotbed of suspicion, violence, and paranoia, one of the first slasher victims fessed up that his injuries had, in fact, been self-inflicted. After this admission, it turned out that at least 9 of the 12 recorded victims had actually caused their injuries themselves and had not been attacked by a razor-wielding maniac. 4 of these people ended up in jail for public mischief, and Scotland Yard closed the case with the conclusion that there had never been a slasher. It was all just collective delusion. Now, we've all heard that laughter is the best medicine, but what happens when it's actually the disease? Maybe these quotes would be more accurate, with Charles Dickens saying, "There is nothing in the world so irrepressibly contagious as laughter and good humor." And according to Mark Twain, "Against the assault of laughter, nothing can stand." That brings us to 1962 and the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. In what is now Tanzania, a small group of young girls started giggling in their boarding school one day. Certainly nothing unusual there, children laugh all the time. This, though, proved to be just a little bit different. After laughing fits lasting up to several hours, this laughter did prove to be contagious in the worst possible way. Soon, other girls had joined in, and 6 weeks later, over half the school was laughing in prolonged, uncontrollable bursts, and the establishment was shut down. Unfortunately, this didn't end the epidemic, as the girls were still having outbursts at home, and the contagion spread throughout their communities. And now, if you're thinking that laughing so much doesn't seem that bad, well, you're actually pretty wrong. It could be totally exhausting, and they weren't laughing because they were happy. In fact, other symptoms of this mass hysteria were crying, rashes, and fainting. The schools eventually reopened, but the laughter epidemic was still going strong, so that to shut down again almost immediately. In total, over 1,000 cases were reported and 14 schools were closed. It's believed that, once again, stress and anxiety were the cause of the initial outbreak. The religious boarding school was not known for its easygoing, lenient nature, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the country in general, as Britain had ceased its rule only a few months earlier. It wasn't until over a year later that the laughter just stopped, as abruptly as it had begun. The only known case of a recurrent mass hysteria epidemic is in a school in western Nepal. Since the 1990s, the small country has seen many outbreaks of mass hysteria, usually presenting as young people crying and writhing on the ground, but they have been isolated incidents. In August 2016, a schoolgirl started shouting and having crying outbursts, which quickly spread throughout her class, resulting in about 12 children demonstrating the same symptoms by the end of the day. The next year, the same thing happened again, with 18 children being afflicted by group dissociative symptoms. And then it happened again in 2018 with 47 boys and girls displaying the same bizarre behavior. It has been suggested that cases such as this might have an environmental trigger, some smell or chemical in the air, but a study of the 2018 phenomenon in the Nepalese school found nothing that could have acted on the children in this way. Once again, it was put down to stress and anxiety, which was then exacerbated by the attention that the episodes received from local onlookers. Every year, once the affected children had been taken out of the school grounds, the symptoms resolved themselves pretty quickly. The outbreaks stopped after 3 years, and no further cases have been reported. So I really hope you found that video interesting and, well, just a little bit bizarre. If you did, smash that like button below. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.